Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Annabelle Creation. So, going into this film, I would say that this film has to be better than Annabelle. Um, but basically, when you're going to say that, just like give this story just no interest. Like, give this story absolutely donut holes worth of zero interest. And then just get ready to just get annoyed with camera angles also in this movie. No offense to the director, but like there is just too many of this like up and down crap or side to side crap that I am just thoroughly annoyed with them doing in this movie. Like, man, like I can't wait to showcase this one piece, and then person has to walk out of that view. But then wait, I have to just look back. I desperately need to. Oh. Again, like, no offense to this director, but I don't get these kind of camera shots in this film. I just really I don't know who was the idea of just doing these kind of like up and down shots where it's like, oh, the girl is at the top of the bed. Oh no, we have to showcase the bottom of the bed and then showcase it back. Like there's too many like kind of repeat kind of camera shots that are just going over and over into this movie, and more than likely that was just like storylined that way to where it was just like, well, like I have to forcibly shoot this way. And so like it's probably not the director's fault at all. Like the director is just like, okay, let's come in here and do everything that the thing said in the story, in the writing. And like I could just come in here and just do what the story says, because like like I would say that this movie is actually like a scary film, but really it has to rely a lot on, again, like cheap stuff, like being completely in the darkness. Like, yeah, like a really darkened scene would be like, well, I don't know what's gonna happen, or flashing of light scene is gonna like, oh, what is gonna slowly happen throughout. Like that's the thing, everything is gonna slowly like I don't know how many times throughout this entire movie I just got bored with, here's the wind up. Let me go read my newspaper. My entire newspaper. Is it there yet? Like, is the jump scare there yet? Like, good God, this film has so many slow burn scares that I'm just like, this is just not a scary film at all. Like, this is a movie that you could fall asleep to. In all honesty, like I just don't like the camera shots. I don't like the wind up and pitch like scares where it's too long of a wind up part. But you know what? Like, some people will find this movie scary. Some people will enjoy it. Like some people will like say that like, yeah, man, I really enjoy this film, and I can probably like I can justify that happening. Like, and especially if you liked the movie The Happening with Mark Wahlberg. Wait a minute, whoa. Are things gonna happen in this film? Is the wind gonna like come and like blow down a sheet? Man, I hope that happens, because I might actually get scared in this film. Speaking of under the sheets. For people that have seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. Under them sheets. Yeah, like, I don't know, I've just kind of seen too many of these scary movies where they play with these kind of things in this film, and I'm just like, where is the Annabelle? I want more Annabelle in this movie. Like, I want more doll. This thing. the thing that you have poster of. Why isn't there more of this thing in the movie? Please give me desperately more of that. That's what I wanted in this film, and I still was like desperately needing like a cowbell. Like I wanted more Annabelle the doll in this movie. And plus we still like just didn't get that. It was just like, well, no, it's not actually Annabelle. It's a ghostly apparition-y thing that so there's not really even a good Annabelle origin of this thing. It's just it's there's oh no. Oh no. Okay, so let's just get into spoilers. Let's get this one done. Thank you for watching this. Like, Annabelle Creations is just like taken from an awful movie. It takes it at a little step further than that. Like, it's just a bad film that I would just say like it's bad, but I want to just like pat it on the back for just like job well done compared to Annabelle. Like, job well done, Creations, because at least it's not Annabelle. At least it's not like, at least it seems like a better movie. And like that's like all the praise it needs. So let's go out of our way to say that it is about that coveted time, because I don't want to. I'm trying to not go way into details and stuff, because like, man, I could just really rip this movie apart, but I don't want to. I just don't want to take the time. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we get to spoil this movie. So the very beginning of this film is to showcase us that we have a guy named Samuel Mullins, who is going to be like the Geppetto of this story. Like, if we have Pinocchio, who is Annabelle, this thing, whatever she decides to show up, then we have like the creator of that, who is to be Samuel. So Annabelle is to be doll number 1, that I think is to not even go out, I guess, because like Samuel like was to eventually deliver all these dolls. Like, he's a doll maker and he sells all of them out. So what eventually ends up happening is Samuel and his wife, who is to be Esther, are to go and take their kid out for one day. And what ends up happening is Samuel is to go and try to change his tire out, because evidently he had a flat tire. And so all of a sudden, one of the lug nuts of the tire eventually roll out onto the street. And so all of a sudden we see another car that is just kind of making its way down the road. And so we have B, who is their daughter, Esther and Samuel's daughter, who decides like, well, I'm going to go and get the lug nut and I'll just help you, Dad. And so all of a sudden we have her being helped into another car, which means she ends up getting sadly run over and killed. The very beginning of this movie is to be this hide and seek part where B is to eventually leave her father a note as he is to build this first doll and say, "Find me." And so Samuel's like, "Oh, okay, I'll play this game." So Samuel is to go out and like start looking for his daughter, and I'm like, here's the wind up and the pitch. Like, give me that scare. Like, come on, right now, in the beginning of the movie. Just come at me, bro. So, we have Samuel, who ends up writing a note for his daughter. Like, a 12-pager. He just really just writes this thing out. And so, Samuel just goes off. And so, B is to go and pick up the note, because she's hiding behind this curtain. And the note says, "Found you." And then so all of a sudden B is like, huh? What? He found me? No. And then Samuel just comes up from behind her and drops her onto the ground, and he's like, I got you. No, like that's not to really happen, but I have to do something to just get more excitement in this movie. So I guess like the first jump scare I guess could come with Samuel like running up behind B and be like, I got you, yeah, you read my note, I found you, ha 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 ha, like any dad would in this situation. But then that leads to eventually B getting sadly ran over. What a horrible transition I had to make there. Uh, so let's get into it. So Samuel is to eventually just take in a bunch of daughters from this like halfway house that has this nun, and so like I guess this is like this nun I guess is like teaching these kids like education, I'm assuming. Like I don't really see that at all during this film, but like this nun I guess is just to be there, just to like I like this must be some kind of like school, something. It has to be that, right? Like I don't know, I don't feel like these kids were getting educated at all. Were they just living here and that's it? Like was that all like their education was really neat? Did they go to school? Like I didn't see that in this movie. I needed to be like queued up of that somewhere. Like somebody needed to tell me that these kids are going to school, because I saw a bus in this movie, but I didn't know if that meant school. Or maybe this nurse has some kind of education. I desperately needed a clip somewhere to justify something. Give it to me. Give me that clip. So, so what eventually happens is these, we have Janice who is to eventually go and have this one chair that kind of leads her up the stairs, because Janice is to, like, I don't want to be insensitive here, but she like is handicapped, and like one of her legs doesn't quite work properly, and so like it kind of feels like this girl is kind of like struggling to walk anywhere, sadly. So Janice is to eventually just kind of open this door that evidently is locked, and Samuel's like, yeah, that's gonna be locked forever, like, because that was my daughter's room, so you're not going in there. So so all the kids are just going and finding their beds, they're finding places. Like to me, like this house like very much bizarrely reminded me of like the Conjuring house, with like the mother and daughter and a lot of kids. Like I don't know what it is, like maybe just kind of like the setup of how like the house like kind of looked compared, like I don't know, it just kind of gave me weird like Conjuring vibes. Like was this the same house as Conjuring? Like did they just use the same deal? Like did they try to find the same house, even though supposedly some of these stories are supposedly true? Um like I don't know if the Annabelle is one, like maybe that's just fiction. I don't know. There wasn't based on true stories or whatever. Like I think everyone is trying to find those now where it's like, "Oh, I think all of these should be true." True stories, right? Because I think one of them or whatever was the Conjuring one, probably was whatever. So pushing on. So um we what we eventually have, like getting to the nitty gritty of this movie. So we have the girls that are starting to play games. We have them playing hide and go seek. We just have them kind of playing around with dolls and whatever. And so it seems that Janice had named her doll like Sue, and so like we have Linda and Janice who are kind of like the best of friends. I don't know if their daughters are like they're both like from the same family or not, like as if they're like sisters, but like it seems like they're the best of like, where it's like, yeah, I hope that we eventually get adopted by the same parents. Yeah, me too, kind of. So like, yeah, I'm just like, give me the scares. So Janice is to eventually get a note that says "Find me," and so eventually Janice is to go and kind of look into the one door that is locked, and so there's to be a note tossed underneath this door that is to say I'm in here or I'm here. So all of a sudden that leads to a door that all of a sudden was locked to be unlocked. So Janice goes into the room and is to eventually like open the closet, and then she ends up closing it, but then bizarrely like the closet like reopens, and then so like Janice like closes the closet and then locks it, and then the closet is like squeeze me, I'm gonna open again. And so Janice is just like, what? Do I have to duct tape this mother to get it closed? Like, close it. Close. So eventually Janice is to also like take this sheet and remove this sheet to find that there's this like dollhouse. So uh eventually what ends up happening is I think Janice ends up putting the sheet over like the Annabelle doll, because the Annabelle doll is now like on I think the bed. And so while Janice is kind of moseying around through this room, we all of a sudden have the Annabelle doll like supposedly like stand up and start to like walk around the room and stuff like that. So eventually what ends up happening is that Janice is to look out this window, and she is to eventually see Samuel, who is starting to walk up into the house. Because eventually I think Samuel is starting to see like a girl in the window, so he's like, oh, like that's probably B. That is to be a ghost in this movie. That is to have been haunting this house. And neither one of these parents just wanted to say that that was to be a thing, but it's a thing. So, uh, like eventually they'll have to just confess that it's like, yeah, just letting you know we had a ghost in our house. Like, sucks to be you, right? Like, you picked definitely the wrong freaking house to go into. So, but yeah, so Janice is to eventually have this sheet start walking up to her, but then all of a sudden, like, the sheet is to just, like, have nothing under it. It's like, ooh, what a cool effect that is. Yeah, it is. It's a really cool effect. Um, like, it could really creep a brother out. so, so Janice, I think this is a spot where Janice is to, because, like, I think she keeps going to this room. I don't know why. Or other different women just start going into this room because they're just like, man, I just need to go into this room. And so, uh, because I'm getting a little confused on these spots because they all feel like the exact same thing to me. And so, eventually, that's when Janice is to eventually just tell the nun that she did a sin and went into a room that she's not supposed to. Like, I think that's all that Janice did in this first attempt. And so then she just went back into her bed and is like, dude, like, I'm gonna just freaking just hope and pray to God that, like, I freaking, like, nobody gets angry at me. So Janice is to eventually tell the nun and confess that she went into the room last night, and the nun is like, well, like, if anything, like, just letting you know, like, if you cause any kind of trouble for any of us, like, Samuel and Esther will be easily just wanting to kick us all out. And that'll probably mean that we're going to get heavily separated. So, like, think before you act, whatever you're going to do next. So eventually what ends up happening is we start seeing these girls that are kind of like playing around in parts of like this, like either farm or like whatever, like the certain kind of house spots. And so that tells us when these people are going to get scared next. We start to see one group of girls who are kind of playing with the scarecrow at one part of this movie. I'm like, oh, okay, so that's going to come back to haunt one of these girls. And of course it does. We get where, but I'm kind of jumping the gun. Uh, so eventually what happens is we actually have a spot where Linda is kind of telling, or Janice is telling Linda about like what she kind of saw and that she's kind of scared about this place. And so what eventually does happen is Linda is to go into the room and eventually spot the ghost of B, and eventually the ghost of B is to turn around on Linda and like, ah, I'm coming after you. So Linda goes and tries to get out of the room and tries to go down the stairs, and what eventually happens is she tries to go down the stairs with this little chair thing, but then the chair thing wants to bring her back up the stairs. And so what eventually happens is Linda ends up getting picked up and like chucked down the stairs. Like her shoe hits the ground floor, and then her body hits the ground floor. And then so now we just have Linda, who is now like in a wheelchair. And so we have the nun. I guess I should actually say what her name is. Sister Charlotte. There we go. Sister Charlotte. We have Sister Charlotte, who's like, well, like, we're just gonna have you sleep in this couch, and like, you're definitely gonna get better. Yeah, by sleeping on a couch. Great, right? So, because sadly enough, the girl can't go upstairs. So I guess that makes a lot of sense of how like that I just turned that like, but whatever. So eventually Janice is like, you know what, like I don't want to be in this house anymore. I didn't fall down the stairs. I actually was chucked down the stairs, and so we need to like talk to these people about like what is really going on. And so what eventually ends up happening is that Janice is to be like kind of wheeled outside, and so like Janice is supposed to enjoy the outside as well as like all the other kids with them playing with the scarecrow that they shouldn't. So eventually all of a sudden we have Sister Charlotte that is to all of a sudden get, I guess, possessed by some demon, which is to push Janice into this room that is to have Janice now eventually have B just put a bunch of her like demon juice inside of Janice. It looks freaking gross. And so Janice is screaming and hollering, and all of a sudden we have Linda and Sister Charlotte that are running after her. And once they finally open the spot of where Janice is, they're like, hey, what's up, Janice? Like, it seems like you're yelling, you're causing a lot of commotion. What's up? And then Janice is just like ghost freaking white because she's now possessed. And Janice is like, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm completely fine now. I just wanted to get out of this room because I'm just having some problems or whatever. Like, we have Janice, who's like bizarrely as cool as a cucumber, but she just kind of has that like I'm gonna freaking get you kind of thing going on with her. You could tell her face is just like, I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you. So now since Janice is technically turned, now Linda has to be kind of like the damsel in distress kind of thing, where Linda is to like kind of talk like how like does Janice seem different to you? Like, does Janice seem different to anybody? Oh, we also had this one spot where Sister Charlotte was to like try to pull at this one um, like little secret elevator, this small elevator thing. And so Sister Charlotte was like pulling at that, and then all of a sudden, like the door that she tries to close like opens, and like she tries to close it again. And like, God, they have these like here's the wind up and here's the pitch kind of things where it's like they have to rely on sound or they have to rely on like these cheap little things that I don't like. Uh, like I don't like it's not like oh I'm gonna get scared by them. No, I hate them. Like I think they're cheap and I hate it because it's stupid. Because I think it's dumb. Yeah. Anyways, pushing on. So, but that whole Sister Charlotte thing happens like way early in the movie. Like I'm trying to remember this film as I'm doing it because it's like good God, there's so much garbage to pull through it. There's a lot of dialogue that just goes freaking over my head because I'm just like, and that's what happens when you have like garbage where you're just wanting it to be like haba haba haba, and it's like haba haba. So here's the part where Linda is to start getting scared. Uh, so here's the let's pause here to do a little bit of a reset. All right. So, so going into this film, Linda is to eventually go and tell like Samuel, like, yeah, Janice doesn't like it here, and like she thinks that she saw your daughter, and Samuel is like, well, my daughter has been dead for a very long time, and Linda's like, yeah, I get that, but like I think that your daughter is still kind of here thing, and so all of a sudden, like, and this is about around the time where, like, Samuel has now carved this, like, cross with, like, Jesus on it, like, as a sculpt. And so, like, Samuel, like, came out there and he's like, hey, you like this sculpt? It, like, looks nice. And Linda's like, yeah. So, Samuel is to just go on and just be like, okay, well, uh, like I'll guess I'll just kind of go in the house and kind of just check things out. So all of a sudden we have one spot where like Samuel is to see the Annabelle doll like in the dinner table, and so then Samuel is to eventually like turn in one part of this house, and I guess like we're to have like the demon Janice slash Annabelle slash B kind of go and kills Samuel at this point because he's holding the cross and he's like, oh, he doesn't say anything. He's just holding the cross. It's just like, this will stop her. So all of a sudden, we just get the freaking grossest freaking scene where all of a sudden you just see this guy's fingers just popping all freaking back. And then you eventually just see this guy get like breaking every single one of his bones in his bate is what I'm assuming is happening. You just hear these poppings and this crackling, and I'm just like, oh God, like that just like, oh man. And so Sister Charlotte is to eventually like find the body and say, well, I gotta go and talk to Esther about this, and kind of mention that her husband is dead. So eventually what happens is like eventually Linda is to like go into her like upper bunk, and eventually there's this spot here where she's to just like, you know what, I'm not gonna freaking like I'm not gonna take this anymore. So Linda is to eventually have this like gun like at the ready, like this door opened and she's having this like gun with this ball on it, and like she's just like, if anything's to come at me, I'm gonna just destroy this with this tiny ball shooting out of this gun. It's gonna get hit and it's gonna feel it. And so Linda is just like I think she's starting to hear something, so Linda just fires out the ball. And then she, like, reels it in. It's like, like, I hope nothing happens to this. And this ball that I desperately need to come back. So Linda keeps firing this ball out, and I'm just waiting for someone to just get freaking hit. I'm like, hey! Like, and it'd be like somebody that just like, ah, like, you're a freaking moron. You hit me with this ball. Like, I was expecting that. But what we ended up getting was that some demon eventually takes the ball and just slowly but surely just starts pushing up with the line. And then we're just like, oh, what's to happen here? And so Linda just goes on her top bunk. And then all of a sudden we have this demoness thing that is to have the Annabelle doll like pressed against the crack of the upper bunk where Linda kind of looks to kind of see in that little crack to see if she can see anything, and all she sees is the Annabelle doll and the demon dragging it back out of the line of sight. And then so like Linda is just like, well, I'm just gonna sleep here. Like I'm just gonna sleep. I'm gonna put the sheet over my head if I feel I'm scared. But yeah, I'm asleep now. Demon, don't get me. I'm sleeping. I'm not scared during this part of this movie. Like the only parts that I think I was actually like scared about was the Janice stuff. But even that, like that just kind of was like, okay, here's the wind up in the pitch. Like those were actually scary moments. Like everything else here was just like, oh, this is unsettling, barely. Like, because I was just like, okay, we're doing these kind of scares. Okay, like once you watch a movie where it's like these kind of like, they repeat a lot of stuff. There's so much stuff that I think they repeated throughout this entire movie. So let's get to the big beefy stuff here. So eventually, what forcibly ends up happening is Annabelle, so Linda is kind of like like Janice is now gone. She's basically like as ghostly as Annabelle slash demons slash whatever things are. So Linda is kind of like the key up character here that is going to try to get rid of stuff. So what eventually happens is Linda, like in the middle of the night, is to go because all the kids are to like see this well, and they're trying to figure out what the heck is in this well. They think something is in this well, as if like Samuel's daughter is probably like tossed down this well somewhere, and like that's where their daughter went, bizarrely. We also have two kids that are exchanging these ghost stories, but like nothing really happens to them. And I was just like, man, like they should get like the pee scared out of them with the stupid crap that they're doing ghost stories. Like, no, you should freaking be peeing your goddamn pants. But you're not. Like, and I wanted them to like have that kind of like, don't do ghost stories during like a scary movie. Like that just means that you should get the worst of it, but you don't. So uh so let's push on towards the end here. So Linda goes and takes the Annabelle doll and chucks it down this well towards the end of this film, and we have Charlotte that goes out there and is to just be like, Linda, what are you doing out here? And so all of a sudden, eventually, Linda is to hear like the sound of like something coming back up the well, and so Linda pops her head down the well, just like, "Hey, I want to see what this is. I'm hoping it's a doll." So it actually does something in this movie. Coincidentally, I think we have the ghost of Janice who is pulling Linda down the well, and you have like Charlotte who's now grabbing Linda for dear life. And so when Linda and Charlotte make their way back to being in the home, we now have them looking for where Janice is, and like bizarrely, the Annabelle doll is where Janice is, and so like now, we have really Charlotte's going like, okay, like, do you guys know where Janice is? And so now all the girls are like, well, I guess we should look for Janice, and so. Uh, Oh, we also have a spot where Sister Charlotte is to eventually go to Esther with this doll and kind of ask her about it. And we have Esther who's like, don't have that doll near me. Because the doll was actually supposed to get locked up in that room with all the, like, the Bible, like that little closet. Like, the doll was supposed to stay in there. But I guess the ghost just wouldn't allow uh, like this doll to not get out. So Esther is telling like Charlotte about the whole backstory of this doll and how what ended up happening was is that both Samuel and Esther like started to pray to anything to eventually uh, be able to talk to their bee again. And so like at first they just like they could like hear certain music come on, like "You Are My Sunshine, My Only Sunshine" off of a record. So like they were kind of happy about that. They're like, oh, that must be our daughter, isn't that great? And so eventually like it became more than that, where like all of a sudden Esther would start to see like a little girl like running through the halls, and so Esther was just like, oh my god, like that's like B, I actually see her. And like both Samuel and Esther would start to see uh like their actual daughter from time to time, and just be like, oh my god, she's like going and having tea with her little like playthings, like wow, like we're actually seeing our daughter. Like so like they were just so happy about that. But then eventually it got to the point where Esther mentions is like, well, like there was one day where like our daughter was just kind of like playing around as this ghost, and then I started to realize like maybe this isn't exactly my daughter, and then I started to tell my husband about this, and so what they decided to do was to toss this doll into this room and to put every page of the Bible, just slapping it all over this entire spot to keep this thing locked and to eventually just keep it there. And just like, okay, like that solves all of this. Like if you guys aren't going into this room, we're just gonna like put this thing in this one room and call it a day. Up until this point. So uh so eventually the girls are to go back up the stairs, and eventually they head into the room where Esther is to be. And all of a sudden they end up finding Esther, who is now hanging on the wall with half of her body missing. And then the girls freak out, and they run outside to eventually go into the car to try to get the car started, but the car won't start. And so all of a sudden, while these girls are trying to get the car started, we have the high beams, or the beams of light kind of flashing off and on. And then all of a sudden we start to see the scarecrow starting to move and starting to like, oh yeah, like look at me, I'm moving. And so the girls are like, hey, look at the scarecrow. And eventually the scarecrow goes missing. And so we also get this moment where um, there's a spot where I think both Samuel and Esther were to go into the room with B, and then all of a sudden, like, B is to turn into a much taller being and, like, start to come after both Samuel and Esther, and that's why they ended up, like, bordering up this whole thing. And so, and, like, books of the Bible and stuff like that, like, all that kind of jazz. So what eventually ends up happening in here is so the doll is supposedly down the well, but that won't get rid of this thing because eventually it just pops back up by the couch. So yeah, it's not going anywhere. So what eventually ends up happening is Janice is to all of a sudden start slicing and dicing some of the girls. Like eventually Janice is to see one of the girls and to cut her, and so like uh, the girls go to Charlotte and it's like, hey, like Janice freaking cut me, and so eventually it ends that we have, or it ends up that one of these girls ends up going into the barn, and she ends up seeing an axe like in the barn. Um, and so this girl starts making her way to this axe. The problem with it is that the actual sharp piece of the axe is to not come off of this piece of wood. So this girl ends up just breaking off like the wood part of this axe. And so all of a sudden we have this scarecrow all of a sudden start moving again in this barn. And so now we have the scarecrow who's kind of like ripping its hands out, and all of a sudden it's like ripping its face out. And so all of a sudden we have this girl who is to like go like closest to this light in this barn and just be like, okay, like I hope that nothing scares me. And so all of a sudden like we turn back to this light, and all of a sudden we have the demon who snuffs out the light and crushes it. And it's like, oh no, light crushed by demon. Uh so eventually we like, man, so much going on in this film, but also there's a lot of nothing going on in this film. But yeah, uh so how do we solve this one? Like how does it like go away? Uh oh. Uh Charlotte is to eventually also like be in this house, and so eventually what ends up happening is she ends up getting like attacked, like and scared pretty good, I guess, by Esther. Because Esther starts like dragging like her body through this room that Charlotte is in, and gives her a pretty decent scare. Uh, and so I'm trying to think how exactly they beat this one. I don't think they were. Oh yeah, like I remember now. So all the kids that were like in the barn had kind of gone out of the barn. There's like nowhere for these kids to go. So what eventually happens is like we now have this time between both Linda and Janice, and so Janice is now like seeing like or Linda is seeing Janice down the stairs, and so Janice is now having this doll that she's kind of cut, and so Janice is making her way up the stairs to go after Linda, and so like now Linda is in the little closet with the Annabelle doll. We see Linda go and adjust the doll so that way it's not looking directly at her. And so Janice is just kind of like looking around in this room. So, uh, and then we also have a spot where Linda is trying to go into this like secret elevator, and she's like trying to like push up in one part of this elevator to the other floor, but eventually like she ends up getting like pushed back down by either like Janice or the demon with its like blackened like fingers. And so like Linda is like, oh my god, like she's like stuck, and like the demon is trying to get at her, but it can't. So what eventually happens is we get to the point where Linda is back into this room, and so what ends up happening is Charlotte is to come back in, and like right before Janice is to almost kill Linda, like there's a whole spot where there's kind of like lights being put into the dollhouse, but I think that's with Janice, where eventually we get the whole like turnaround scared from B happening. Um, but yeah, so I'm all over the place with this review. I should have went to sleep. I should have went to bed. Um, like I'm trying to remember all this, but I feel like I'm just like ugh. So I should have probably went to bed. Um, but yeah, so uh, what eventually ends up happening is they end up. Charlotte is telling Janice to forgive her, tosses a rosary on Janice and basically like shoves her into the room of the book of the Bible. And Annabelle is also in that closet as well. And so it just seems like both Janice and Annabelle, or this demon or whatever, are just fighting it out. And so uh, Charlotte is to toss an armoire in front of this closet and just hope for the best. And so what ends up happening is the very next morning, cops are to be going in there, opening up the closet to find out that whatever this thing was, like scratched its way out of this closet and just made it freaking out of there. And so uh, we have the priest who is to have like gone through there and kind of just absolved everything, and he is to be like, well, whatever evil was in there like no longer exists. Like this house is now clean, this house is now clear. So the preacher is just like, well, hey, like who wants this doll now, huh? This Annabelle doll, who wants it? Do you want it? Do you want it? Do you want to get frightened next? Like, so none of the, because this is Father Massey, like none of these girls want this doll. So if anything, the cops just take it and put it in the trunk, and they're just like, you know what, like just go ahead and take that one. So we eventually just have Charlotte and Linda just being taken on this bus to some other place, where they're just gonna have to kind of just deal with what other future is to bring for them, and because they don't want to be in that house anymore, like whether it's like clean or not, like I wouldn't go back in that house. So like I'm kind of wondering if this is the Conjuring house. Like I just like I'm thinking that like it feels like the Conjuring house, like as if they like adjust something or whatever. Like I don't know, like it feels weird to me. So uh so what ends up happening is we find out that there's this couple that are wanting to adopt a kid. I'm like, oh, is Linda gonna find a home? Like, isn't that great? But no, we end up finding out that Janice is to get adopted by two parents. But Janice is not going by Janice; she's going by Annabelle because technically she's like the doll. She's the doll, she's the demon, she's B, she's all kinds of things wrapped into one. So what eventually happens is that like we start to like have this couple who grows up with this daughter, and then eventually like Janice is to become a much older woman. Like I think they kind of photoshopped like what how she was to look much older, and so eventually these parents are just kind of like, you know what, I hear some kind of sound, like what's going on. So all of a sudden they wake up to have like the father go out to the room and then come back in to realize that their daughter is now coming in this room and um, going and killing both of her parents, and some guy is also running in there and to stab them and kill them. And so it's like, And so that all of a sudden starts the whole like beginning of the Annabelle movie. They have the same actress come back and do that same scene. Well, probably like they do like they probably reuse the footage and then they kind of like reuse the footage to just maybe like a different take or something like that. But like yeah, they like if anything maybe like the camera angles are different or maybe they like redo that whole shot, which would be really cool to have spent that kind of money to redo that whole shot over again. But maybe they reuse stuff. So, but yeah, so with that said, that kind of covers most of this movie. I kind of took the lazy way out just because I'm like, I don't want to have to remember every little bit of this movie, or I don't want to have to just like go through like moment to moment or whatever. I in a roundabout way review this one just because it was just like they used darkness scares. I didn't enjoy this movie compared to probably The Nun. The Nun, I was like, I'm willing to take notes for this one. I'm willing to take little things, little details, and whatever. But like for like Annabelle creations and just Annabelle in general, is like this is probably just going to be another dumpster fire of a movie. Where like I was just like, none of this writing, I don't care about any of it. None of the writing was good in this one, and because I have no regard for Annabelle, so like I just kind of phoned this one in all honesty. But like, man, if this is like phoning it in, just like at this point, like at least it took me like 51 minutes to review this one, so I'm gonna get out of here. Yeah, so in a very roundabout way, I reviewed this one. More than likely, I might just want to go back to this and just like put a better thing out there. But like, there might be a point where this may not get barely 5 views. So I don't know. Like, we'll see if people are interested. If you watch this whole thing, thank you, because man, this one was rough. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.